Yeah, good morning, everybody. Jimmy Wallace here with our Lesson 10 Q&A. And it's our last one of the course. And hopefully we'll be able to cover off everybody's questions and anything that's outstanding that people want to review today. As I said earlier, I'm hoping to cover Lesson 10. We'll go through that and we'll go through some examples. And then if we have a block of time at the end, I'll go through sort of the 20-step process that my wife and myself's company uses with our design work. And yeah, so that should be helpful for you. Let us proceed then, take a quick peek at lesson number 10. All right. And if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to throw it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself as we go here. Yeah, so I think lesson 10's instructions are pretty straightforward, especially since you've gone through the zone 1 design phase already, got a good feel for what's expected with the bigger picture when we're looking at that whole site design. And one thing that's important to note is we are putting together here a conceptual design, and we'll touch on that with some of the examples. And yeah, let's just take a quick peek. So the first part of the assignment is pretty straightforward. It's a local network survey, just sort of taking a look at the resources that are available to you in your area. So like-minded people, mentors, designers, yeah, anybody in your area that fits that. So I don't think that requires a whole bunch of explanation. Just before I get too far along here. All right. So yeah, the concept plan, again, is going to have a lot of similarities to the Zone 1 design that you've just done, other than the fact that we're looking at a much larger, potentially larger space. If you're in an urban environment, then Zone 1 may have been, a good chunk of your project site. On acreage, that's probably not the case, and the rest of the design process here will take up the bulk of your drawings. So let us take a look at what we're hoping to receive, and I'll just add a note here that please do check out the rubric as you're putting your assignment together, just to make sure that you've got everything that we've asked for, okay? Because this is what I use as a guide when I'm grading. So if you're able to tick all those boxes, you're in good shape. And honestly, everybody at this point in the course is in great shape because you've all done some outstanding work here. And so this shouldn't be too onerous for you. Okay, let's take a look here. So some of the items that we are going to want to include is your base plan, so your existing plan. And if we go to that slide in the template file, which you may or may not be using this exact layout, but I hope that you're following it somewhat. There we go. We got the local network survey. And here is where we want to see your base plan. Okay, on that first sheet here. And honestly, that's often what is included in a conceptual design. So having that base plan as an individual standalone sheet is a good idea. So the next here, we're looking at that concept plan, that overall concept plan of your project site, and some of the things that we are looking for here as well as a mission statement, design goal list, So let's take a look at a few of those sheets. So here's our proposed plan template sheet. And if we just go to the right, there's a couple of examples here you can reference. And this is, I must say, this is one of the things that I really like doing that Angela, my wife, and myself do is when we're trying to highlight some of our work, we'll make sure that we are graying out our base plan. And that way we don't, somebody looking at this as well as ourselves, we don't have a whole lot of work to see where the new ideas are coming, right? So there's some good labeling here and a scale bar, which is always important. And of course, your title block. And I'm not sure if there's another, there we go. There's another concept plan that's, graphically very nice. Some very interesting elements in it. And this is, more, this is the sort of labeling that we do. These are called callouts. So you can have a label with an arrow and on the end of the line or just the line itself. And this is a nice way of labeling a drawing. Now, in this particular case, if this was mine, I would almost say that some of this is a little too faint, right? But overall, this is lovely. And again, we're just getting into the aesthetics here, not the actual ideas that are being placed on paper. So a couple of different examples that you can look at. Go back. So the next sheet here, we're looking at the statement of purpose. And of course, you're going to have that in the back of your head because, otherwise, what are you doing? There is some goal here, either from yourself or your client. We only get calls from people that have problems, right? Nobody ever calls us to tell us they love their landscape and just wanted to share that. So it's they probably love aspects of it, but there's things about it that just aren't resonating for them. So that lands right here, that statement of purpose, and then some direct goals, right? So during the course, you've identified opportunities that are on your site and some of the goals. Maybe you have compaction in your soil, and that would be a goal that you want to relieve. You want to increase fertility. There can be all kinds of different goals here. And then we want to see your proposed zones. So those may be a little bit different to the zones that you laid out initially in the course. They may not be all, dramatically different at all, but most likely there is a bit of a change with those. And then with that, of course, we have pathways and fences and gates. And then again, that's overlaid on the grayscale base map. And let's go back up here. So we've sort of covered this first little bit. And then we get into the actual water management plan. And for my wife and myself, this is like the main starting point in a lot of ways. We do sector compass maps or sector analysis prior to any design sheets being created, but this really does, in my opinion, this really drives the landscape because it's one of those things. If we look, I probably haven't dove into this. Human scale of permanence. And we'll see if we can get an image of that. There we go. So this was in part what the agrarian platform was created from. And the agrarian, which is a farm-based agricultural design protocol, it has 10 distinct different layers. And with Yeomans, what he discovered, and he was the originator or creator of the yeoman's plow, which many of you will have, or we'll call it a keyline plow. Oops. And this is an incredible tool on an agricultural setting for decompaction, for moving water from places where it's abundant to drier areas. But getting back to this, when we go through the Yeoman scale of permanence, we look at different well, there's grouped certain parts of the landscape in here. So climate is one that is the most difficult to change. So it's way up here on the top right. And as we get easier and easier, we slide down the scale, and soil is the final. Because sure, we can create soil, right? No problem. It's a lot harder to change the climate, even though humans seem to have managed to become pretty good at doing that. But as you can see, we get into land shape or land form. So if you have a mountain in your landscape, to remove that mountain or change it, it's a huge amount of effort. And you can see where water is. Water is way up there. So for myself, water does set the tone for the design stage itself. So where were we here? There we go. So we're in that water management. So we want to hear about your strategies that you have planned for your project site. And I would say the biggest thing that I see missed by some students is just the water off of a roof, right? So it may not be possible to do much with that. And on a acreage setting, it's not quite as, maybe not quite as vital, but in urban, it certainly is. So just have a question here from Aurelia. The scale permanence meant to show the amount of time it takes to affect the change. Yeah, it's time and effort. Exactly. And that is why when we look at the Regrarian platform, we're 1 through 10 here, energy being the easiest, but you can see where soils is, right? It's almost the easiest. Economy, but water's number 3, and geography and access are way up there. So again, this is a different design protocol, but I'm just sort of pointing to what I feel is that it's this really important tipping point in any design is what can we do with the water resources on the site. All right. So we've gone through water, and then we get to soil fertility, right? So that's a huge piece. And that may be as simple as decompacting an area. I think Michelle was looking at that for her property. So there's different methods you want to look at. So for a larger space, a keyline plow is great. And for a smaller space, a broad fork is very effective. And I've got this one right here and use it I used to use it a lot on project sites, and we haven't actually done any installations now for probably a year, just from family, shifting and family dynamics. But we use this at home still quite a bit. So, all right. And yeah, another thing with soil fertility, of course, is if we raise the organic matter content in our soils just 1%, we're going to get 20,000 plus extra gallons of storage per acre. So that's a really low hanging fruit in terms of holding capacity not only in your soils, but just on the project site itself. So the soil is a biggie, and then we go to the vegetation, where we are looking at, not sure if that's listed on this here or not. No, yeah, for some reason it isn't on this list, but it will be in the rubric. That is very interesting. Yeah, I don't see it there. Certainly part of the deal where we have vegetation elements that we're talking about. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and vegetation and elements, when we go back to our plant system design, we're getting quite specific about what plant is going where. And when we do a conceptual design, we're showing plant types, but not exact plants that we're placing within that part of the design. And we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Let me just see what they have here as an example. Okay. So these are getting more specific, right? So we're calling specific plants for different areas. And all I would say is, yeah, this is a great thing to go through with the course here. But if you were providing the service for someone else, this would be a separate step. And the reason I say that is if you look at this space here, are we? I'm not sure how large this is, but it looks like it's part of an acreage space. So when you start the design, you would not know yourself how much work you're going to have to put into a planting plan. So that's why we separate it. Now, we will include it if we're doing an urban project, because the urban space is only so big, and we know we're not going to be, you know, going overboard on plants. So that's, we still, with a conceptual plan, will show plant types, but then we'll start to go into that detail stage with our urban land designs and provide the planting plan and all those construction details. And then anything that's on acreage is a separate agreement, a separate contract. We just do the concept. If they go, wow, we love this, we want to, well, which is hopefully what they say, we want to get more details and have an idea of how to phase this out, then we provide them with a price to do that. Right. So we get then to phasing and budget, and, you know, honestly, this is daunting, really. Not easy to get a grasp of at this stage in your journey, I'm sure. And so I would say, you know, do your best with it, but the only way you're going to get an idea of budget really is to execute a few projects and see how it goes. And then you realize there's just this incredible variability, but you get averages, right? So when we estimate an installation and we factor in the site conditions, you know, we estimate them accurately. We're, you know, we've been doing it long enough. But in the beginning, when we were doing our installs, we would design and then we would install. We had to do it a different way. We had to do it on a cost plus basis, where we got paid for our labor and then the materials plus a markup. We just, you know, we couldn't put an exact price on things. And in part, that was a good thing we did that, because we had a few very large jobs. We had one job we were on for 3 years, and if I had tried to estimate that, wow, it could have gone quite bad. So yeah, it took, gosh, probably took me a decade to be able to really nail pricing. And I did that for 2.5 years as a commercial estimator and project manager. And that solidified, that built all the skills I needed to find. Gosh, I should just, if you don't mind, I am going to grab a book here. So it's one I use for estimating that you guys might enjoy. So 1 second here. Do you know where my estimating book is? When I used to do my.
Is it down here?
No, those are my
Here, one second. What does it look like?
green time saver.
Is it up top?
There. It's not even green. You would have had a hard time.
Oh, well, it's not.
All right. Sorry about that. So I'll read it out to you because I don't think my camera's going to pick it up very well, but it's called the complete. Here, I'll probably even find it online here. It's out of print, but you can find it used. The authors passed away, so well, there it is. That is what you'd want to hunt for if you're keen on designing and you see yourself installing. That book is a lifesaver. And believe it or not, I dropped into this job years ago. We decided to basically shut down our business at one point. This was about 15 years ago. And I went to work for another firm for about 2.5 years. And all I did was estimate and build commercial landscapes that were designed by landscape architects. And basically, I had to teach myself how to do this, which was crazy. But I was quite good at it. And I got that way. And we won in 2.5 years. I think we hit all of our projected targets on each job that we did, except for one. And so I was pretty pleased with that. But this book is what really helped get me there. And very, very valuable tool to have if you can get it. So you might have to hunt and use bookstores, but says it's at Amazon here. I'm not sure. That's, yeah, I don't know if Amazon, I doubt it. But anyhow, hope that helps you that. Okay. So yeah, don't be, I do honestly, when I go through all the final designs and I look at the phase and budget, and I do not give it a lot of my time because it's it's a really deep subject all in itself. We could spend 10 weeks just trying to go through this. And so do your best, and you'd probably be horrified at the cost of some things, which is what you end up uncovering when you're doing estimates. But you got to start somewhere, and this is certainly a safe place to do that. And what we found as for very rough pricing is we discovered at one point that it's all square footage like it is a house. So if you had so many square feet of planting area, we could average that out at so many dollars per square foot. I think at one point it was $12 or $15, or I can't remember off the top of my head, because it will have changed dramatically now with inflation. But yeah, that's a really important piece long term. But that's something that you probably will learn over time. And then when we get to, let's see here, so this is our phasing sheet, and then we're going to get into permaculture principles and social permaculture here. So we're looking at some of the demonstrate at least 5 principles that were used. So I'm sure that will be quite easy. I'm sure most or all of you probably have included way more than that. Yeah, and then social permaculture, and then your final SWOT analysis. So, and that is it. And then if you do have any comments, I think everybody will get an email or a note sent to them at the end of the course asking you if you want to provide feedback for your experience in the course. So there's I think Dow Orion will be sending that out, so you can take a look at that afterwards. And one interesting piece that's come up with our schedule is that normally we'll have our Q&A, and then next Monday is the due date for the assignment, and then by the end of the week, that's it. We're all done. And there was some discrepancy in the dates. So what I'm saying here is everybody's going to have basically some extra time. There's an extra week there, but I have to ask everyone to do their best to submit for next Monday, because the following Monday, I have a bunch of lesson 5 assignments I have to go through with the other class. So if everybody delayed a week, it would take me quite a while to plow through it all. If you can't get it in by next Monday, no worries. You've got some wiggle room there, but just try and do your best to get her in for Monday. And then I typically spend quite a bit of time on each person's assignment. So best case scenario, it'll probably take 3 days to go through everybody's work and give you good, some proper feedback. But that's what's going on with our timeline. So you do have a little bit extra time, which is nice. Let's see here. We have a question. Brooke had a question about lesson 10, and it's about formatting. So you're not able to fit all the plant legends onto a single page. You have an overall concept. You have an overall concept that you're going to break down in subsequent slides. Yeah. Currently have new design elements that haven't been covered. I also repeat the previous vegetation slides. Well, they will be part of the overall, Brooke. So big picture, they would be included in your concept. You don't have to include those specifically if you don't want to in that final design details, because you already have, but it's completely up to you. If you think graphically, it looks better doing so, then please do. Because one thing when I go through people's assignments is I'll go back. If I have any questions, I'll start to scroll back in the work and just take a look. So yeah, no worries there. As long as you are providing what's in the rubric, were great. And, honestly, the rubric's not really showing us anything about vegetation here, which is interesting. But I would encourage you to include that. That slipped through the crack. I'm not sure why that is. But yeah, the concept plan is the biggie. And I'm not sure, there's a little bit here under resources that you can take a look at. Just some helps, some tips for creating the vision statement, goal list, that sort of thing. So a little bit of some good info here. And the phasing. Now, the phasing, of course, is really going to be site specific. So I'll show you a couple of projects that we've installed. And so phasing with those, they're going to be different with every single job because you have access issues potentially. And you have client wishes, right? Some clients are going to say, well, I want to start over here. And if it's possible, physically possible to do that first, then that's a great idea. Okay, before I get into that, Michelle has a question here. Are you responsible for contracting and hiring individuals for all aspects of the project that don't involve vegetation and planting? Oh, that's a good question. Well, up to last year, Michelle, we would do the design for our clients, and then they would ask us for pricing. And we were very much hands-on on the job through the whole project. So we would be part of the preparation. And what would that mean? Well, that would often on an urban site mean myself and an excavator operator helping to prep the site. So we would subcontract some things out. So that is one of them. We used to have all our own machinery and we don't do that anymore. I wouldn't recommend that for anybody because of the overhead. So we bring in people. That's all they do is, and I've worked with this one fellow for 20 years. So it's very, very easy to work with him. So we bring in subcontractors to help us with prep. Typically, if we have hard surfaces to create, so patios, walkways, retaining walls, we have stonemasons that work with us. And during the preparation portion of our work, we'll get ready for them. And they often come in first because they dominate the site. They have to have their stuff everywhere. And if you're trying to build some, beautiful landscape somewhere and they're destroying it with their, so it's best that they do their thing first. And then we come in and we do our irrigation work, get all our irrigation main lines prepped and in the ground. And then we backfill with topsoil. So that whole piece at the end is all about us. But masonry and equipment operation are two pieces that we would often have people brought in for. Now, we did some of our own carpentry, fences, pergolas, that sort of thing. If it gets more elaborate, I would bring someone in for that. And then if I went way back in time, we used to bring people in to cover more stuff. When I first started, I didn't know much about irrigation, so we relied on others for that. And then, we adopted more and more, but I've got to be involved in the prep, the irrigation, the topsoil, and the planting and mulch for me to stand behind it, right? Because I even some of the better subcontractors that we work with, or sometimes we'll hand off projects, which that'll be what we start doing now more so, is handing off projects to others in our area. And there's one woman who has a ecological restoration company in town here, and she does a great job. But it's different than what I would do. And I'm not going to dictate how she does her work, but I know that I prefer my scope my prep and how I build a garden to how she does it. But, you know, in the end, as long as things are growing really well and everybody's happy, that's great. I'm just very particular about that end. So long-winded answered your question, Michelle. Yeah, we do bring in others. And then if we bring in a mason, let's say, we will agree ahead of time. Like, this is a whole different kettle of fish, is looking at the installs and the contracts and all that stuff. But we basically say, look, the mason has priced your project at, say it was $20,000. That's incorporated into our installation, and then we will add a markup. And we tell them ahead of time, this is the markup, this is the percentage. That's what we go by as a percentage. And then that's all fixed price based on all of the quantities. So if it's 100 square foot patio and then it ends up being 120 square feet, well, the price gets adjusted based on the increased area if they agreed on that. So I don't want to go down that path too much today, because that's really outside of the class. You know, it's the installation bit is huge, and it can certainly make or break you, right? If you make a mistake, it can be quite painful. So my advice to anybody starting out with designs and then wanting to jump in and do installations, start with small jobs, right? Do small jobs, do it on an hourly rate, and track everything you do, track all of the time. So if you have to move a yard of soil with a wheelbarrow, how long does it take you, right? The book I mentioned has production rates in it, and it'll tell you that. It goes, you know, high, medium, and low production. Those are the valuable lessons to learn as you're getting better and better at building landscapes, is how long does it take you on the ground? Okay. Christopher, got a question here. What does the appendix entail? Yeah, you know, honestly, I don't even look at this, Christopher, so don't worry about it. If you want to place things in here, like additional information, you know, that's the place to put it, and that's great. But I don't often see people have enough time to do that, right? It's usually a stretch to get all of these filled in to their satisfaction, right? So yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. All right. I think that covers the assignment pretty well. Does anybody have any question about the assignment specifically? If not, we can take a peek at a few other things here. And you can unmute or use the chat, whatever you prefer. And we'll just leave that open if something comes up. For now, what maybe I'll do is just show you an example. So now we're looking at the design. We're not going to talk about installations at all, because again, that's a whole class unto its own. This is I had to put this together for a course that Javin Bernakovich and myself are doing. I had to lay out my design process, and I was actually quite amazed when I did it, how many steps there were to it. So I'll just go through that with you. So we start out with an initial contact. So somebody will call or email, and we will get them to fill in a questionnaire, you know, somewhat similar to the one your client survey in the beginning of the class, a little more extensive maybe. So we'll get them to fill that in, and then we'll have them book an initial phone conversation with us. And over the years, you know, way back when we first started on the island here. I guess it was 27 years ago. Somebody called, like, we were there. We were there the next day or as quickly as possible. And yeah, what can we do? And we had no real conception of what a good fit might be with a client. We're just happy somebody wants to improve the landscape. So over the years, we've developed this system where we get a questionnaire filled out, we get an initial phone call under our belt, and then we have a really good feel for whether this person or persons are a good fit for what we provide. They may want something that's, way outside our scope. And I'm not afraid to go outside my scope, but I'm not going to venture too far outside because I've done that before, and it's I could do it when I was 30. I'm not so crazy about it now. So this is a really important first bit, is that first step. And then if it looks good and client's happy or prospective client's happy, we'll do an initial site visit. And some of my colleagues in BC, some colleagues will charge to go and see somebody, right? Initial meeting, they're going to charge, but they're also going to provide them with for something, right? I know a firm over on the mainland that provides just a very rough sketch of some design ideas. Now, myself, when I go to see a new site, I'm just there absorbing the site. I'm not in a creative space, right? I'm just trying to get a good handle on the project site. So I tell people that they're not going to hear anything, like, oh, we should do this here or this here. No, that comes later. That comes during the design when we're immersed in the site, when we've done all of our analysis, and then we can, confidently start pulling ideas up. We go through that, and then we have that initial meeting. And then after our initial meeting, we can generate a proposal for them, right? So the proposal is a fixed price. So we've done, and I'll show you a couple of examples here that I've got tabbed out on this sheet. I'll show you a few examples. And then we figure out how are we going to survey this property? Is it, if it's an urban site and the clients have a plot plan with the building footprint on it, that's great. That's what we want with an urban site. Building footprint, property boundary. That's good enough for us to get going with. Now, if we're on an acreage site, the mapping part of an acreage site can be pretty daunting, and especially if it's treed. So we often will suggest a drone survey, and that will, in the money that the client spends on the drone survey actually saves on our fees in terms of mapping. We're not having to worry about where fence lines are, where certain elements are provided. It's not a heavily wooded property, right? We can see all that with high resolution images, which I may have shown you. I'll show you an example today. So those are the first three big steps, right? Contact, make sure we're a good fit, go to see them, check out the property, do a proposal. And all of this, honestly, this is probably a whole day's worth of work, right? So that's why step 1 and 2 are so important, because I've just basically taken a whole day and provided it to somebody else I don't know. I have no idea whether we're going to get the job. You're just beginning to learn a little bit about the person, let alone the site. And that's a really important part, is what is this person like? We've had curveballs thrown on us earlier in our life where yeah, people did crazy things to us, and we work hard to try and avoid, very clear communication and avoid any issues that could potentially come up. So we've got the proposal accepted, and these are the items that we are including. So we actually are going to include that initial visit in our proposal as a build part of the project. We're going to create a base plan. We are going to, now it's not on here, but we often will put in a sector analysis, but that's usually pretty, it's maybe an hour. It's very quick for us. We're going to do a water layer, an access layer, a soil layer, and that provides us with an initial concept. And then we provide that to our clients. We get some feedback, and we will edit that a couple of times, up to a couple of times, and that's part of our agreement, until we get a final concept. And that's it. That's basically what you guys are producing with your work, is that final concept, right? And then we look at details, and those are planting plans, construction details. If there's a patio, a wall, any structure, that falls into this part here. So after that proposal, we get acceptance, and then, well, most of the time we get acceptance, we may not. And then we get going on a drone survey, or we try and grab some QGIS, some LiDAR data to help us with the base plan. And then once we have this, so this is a funny order that we go. It'll be different to what everybody else does. But so we assemble as much as we can on the computer, and then we'll go out and do a site visit, right? This is the second site visit now. The first one was meeting the people. The second one is actually drilling into the base plan. And because we have started it already, we know what we've missed, right? So we've started the base plan, and we're looking at this going, we don't quite know where, say, the entry is, or where the road, there could be any number of elements that we're not clear on. And that's where this initial site visit really helps. And when we're there, when we're at that initial site visit, we are just picking up site data. We're not worried about where we're putting a pond, or where we're putting swales, or what we're going to, we don't think about that at all, right? It's all about getting that base plan as accurate as possible. And then that's it. We've created that. We go on to the sector map, right? And then we share that. So we'll do a sector compass, and we'll share it with our client. And if they say, oh yeah, that looks great, excellent. And if they want anything tweaked, we'll make sure we adjust it to sort of align with what they see. And then that's a good guide as we go forward. They've approved this. We know we've got privacy issues here, or whatever those outside forces are. And then we start on our water layer, and we go through that. And then once we finish the water layer, we will set up a Zoom meeting, and we'll have it's usually an hour. We sit down and present that layer. We talk to them about how we got there, and sometimes we get feedback on that right away, and sometimes we don't. And we're not really looking for feedback in these initial layers. We're just showing them how we're getting from point A to point B. Because if we did not show them all this, and we just presented this big concept plan, it may just be a little too overwhelming for a lot of people to absorb, right? Like, why did you do this? And why did you do that? And, we prefer a lot of inclusiveness with our clients. We want them to feel like this is all part of they're part of the process, right? So we do the same with the access layer. and we overlay that base plan. Now we're overlaying the water too. So we have the water below it, and then we have a meeting, and then we do the soil layer and have an initial concept after that. And that's where we wait for feedback at this stage. Sometimes we get feedback. We have a client right now, we're doing a 7-acre homestead, and we've gone through the water layer, and boom, we got, some pretty key feedback right away, and we made those edits, and they were happy with that. So we know going into access, the water is solid, right? We know what we're doing there. So this is the point where you may get feedback as your initial, and then you adjust it. And, we don't always have a Zoom meeting there. It may be a very small edit to get to our final concept. And then when we're done with that, we're kind of looking at more detailed design after that. So we're looking at planting plan and construction details. We're also looking at plant palette creation. And I'm not sure if I've shown you that before. I'll find one here. It's the way I think there's one here. This has been one of my challenges. Oh, it's not a challenge. There we go. Okay, so we'll stop share here. So we have a really inclusive design process, but when we get to the planting plan, I want to, this is what really drives me in the landscape. I love the water end of it, but this is where I started. I love plants. I love putting them together. I love seeing them thrive. And when I put a planting plan together, I don't want there to be edits. Like it's like painting for me. I've painted it, that's it, we're done. So for me to do that and for someone to get value, I want them to know what colors I'm using, so to speak. So I provide them with this planting palette. Now, this is got highlights in it. You'll see normally I would send this off and it would not be highlighted. But this is the conceptual design for this client right here. And these are the plants that I see using on this particular design based on this site and based on what they've told me, their likes and dislikes, what they're trying to do. And I include a few pictures, and I basically include a list of primarily botanical names, but there are some common names in there. And then I ask them to look at it, and if there's something that jumps out at them, if there's a plant there they don't like, then let me know. We'll make sure it doesn't go into the project. And that's all they have to do. It's not what they like, it's what they don't like. Right? So when we get to that, when I get feedback from them, then I can move forward with the planting plan. And as I'm creating it, I'm highlighting what I've included. Right? So I'm creating the design on our software, and I'm referencing the planting palette. So I'm making sure I'm using what's approved, and I'm tracking what I do end up using. So as you can see, it's not all the plants. And this is what I explain to people is, here's a list. I'm not using everything. If there's things you don't like, let me know. And if there's something you absolutely must have, let me know that too. We'll include it. But this is a one-shot deal, and I don't edit anything afterwards. The caveat to that is if, I'll give you an example here. Let's say this particular project that we installed. This is a big planting area that we designed and we priced it. And then they gave us the okay. I went to go, we did all the prep. We were getting ready. I went to order the material, the plants. I had to make a whole bunch of substitutions because they weren't available. They were available when I built the design, but when I went to install the local nursery, their plant availability changed. So in this case, I did some significant changes, but I did it without documenting it on the design itself. I don't want to redo all of this. So what I do is I did it on site. The material came, we laid it all out and away we went. So the actual in the ground planting is somewhat different because I couldn't get everything that's here. So the only caveat to that is now the homeowners don't have a design that matches what's in the ground. So if I was doing that again, I would offer to do an as-built, which is basically you come in after and you edit based on what actually went in the ground. But that's a lot of work, and you'd want to have that covered. So let us just go back. I know we're kind of running down on time here. I'm trying to find where I was. There we go. So yeah, planting palette, and then the planting plan itself, which is basically what I just showed everybody, and then construction details, which I wouldn't be diving into that realm at the moment unless you're really comfortable with it, because if you're designing a retaining wall, let's say, and something happens and it doesn't work, well, you're liable for its failure, or you could be. So you want to be careful with this area right here, the details. So what I could do, I know we're just at the top of the hour. If anybody wants to hang around for a couple minutes, I can just show you a couple of examples here of the quotes that we've done. That might be helpful. So this is an example here. And I think this was an actual example, but I've taken all the client ID out of it. But this is how I structure estimates. I like using color. I also break this out into different sections. So we have an initial site meeting, and I'm going to charge for that. And my design rate in Canada here, I charge 150 an hour. Way back when I was starting, I charged 75 an hour. So 27 years ago, it was 75 an hour. And now it's doubled, which, yeah, it's had to. Just the overhead is crazy. So there is that ceiling. So I'm right at the top of the ceiling. I can't go beyond that. There's no way, because then you're into landscape architect rates, and you know, I don't have the same toolbox that they do. So that's my rate, and then had to drive to go visit this site, and sometimes it might be close and I wouldn't charge anything for mileage. And then in this case, perhaps it was, you know, half hour, 45 minutes away. So I'm going to charge mileage. So before we even get going, we've got 210 bucks there. And then I look at, how am I going to set this drawing up? What do I have to do? And that might be a drone survey import. So the drone does their work. I get a file. I can import it into our software. So I don't have to do a whole lot of stuff to it, but it's still time. I might have to get some LiDAR data. So I would pluck this free data off the web and use QGIS to create contours or do other things with it. And then I'm going to have to go back, do a site visit, And again, more travel and a little more mapping. So having gone through this so many times, I know that for certain sites, you have to spend a lot of time on the base plan. The 7-acre site that I was talking about that we're doing, excuse me, we spent a huge amount of time just creating the base plan, way more than I thought. But you know, if you don't do that right, you'll be sorry as you go through the course, or sorry, as you go through the design, you'll have to go back and figure out where you've gone wrong. So it's best to do it right. So the way I break out my quote is, I'll then kind of subtotal that. So basically, site prep base plan, $1,680 for this example, right? Then we look at the sector map, zone map, which I don't do. I just don't do it. Don't bother. That's my personal preference, right? I'm not suggesting anything with you guys. And then I look at water. So I bust down the water. So what am I going to do here? Macro watershed, micro watershed, water flows, rain garden. So, key line patterns. I have an idea. What am I going to have to include? Maybe maybe something else, maybe irrigation pond, maybe rainwater harvesting system. No idea, but I would include it here. And then I get a total. So I have a total water layer. And then I do the same with the access. And then I do the same with the soil. So I look at different components and you just break everything out as much as you can and put a number on it, right? And then I have edits here. So I'm going to do 2 edits. And they'll probably take me an hour each. So that's worth money. So the actual conceptual end of the drawing is ended now. And here was the base plan set up, and here's the concept plan. So that's what that comes to. That's where we are. Now, these people, if we're looking at details, that's when it starts to add up in here. So we might have, I have no idea where this quote originated, what design it came out of, but these were the numbers that got generated. We have video meetings, we have in-person meetings, and then this is a printing, right? So usually it's at least $100 to print for us. And then the fudge factor. So this is an important line to add. If you have a client that you're not feeling 100% comfortable with, are they going to throw you a curveball? If you say you're going to edit after you do a concept, the edit might be pretty significant. It may be something you have to almost rip it apart and start over, right? So you got to be careful with that. So there's some of the rough, this is how we would, oops, I didn't spell correctly there. This is how we kind of present it. We break out the pricing in site analysis, base plan, concept design, and then details. That gives people an idea of where the time and energy is going. And in this case, it would be $5,730. So that's the price they would have received, plus tax. But that's how we go through our estimating. And I've got a couple of different ones here. When we go on to acreage, this is a very complicated one that we did. We do feasibility reports. Here's a farm one. So the farm has 10 different layers. So we go through the same idea, right? Creating the base plan, in that case, 900. And then we go through these 10 different layers and we built in 6 hours of edit. And that's what the farm plan was, right? But these are larger acreage, and even just the water layer on a large parcel, that I might have underpriced that, right? And at this time, it was 120 an hour, right? That was a few years ago. So hopefully that's helped you all out a little bit. It's kind of spooky when you're first starting out in these things, and if you can, try and do your initial work on an hourly basis, and maybe even just put a range of pricing in. Like, say somebody wants you to do a design and you think, well, it could be, maybe it's 2,000, maybe it's 3,000. Just give yourself a range, see if the client's okay with, providing that. And those were the first designs I did. That's exactly how we did it. Was just by the hour. And they were large properties, and I was kind of way over my head in some ways with those, but we went through a steep learning curve, and the projects worked out well. And there is a question here, I think. Let me get to the chat. I might have missed. So Rayla was asking about, could I share an example of our questionnaire? Excuse me. I can, but I'd have to put one together and like delete all the client information. I can't share an active document with you. Let me just see. I have a master file. Let me see if I can. There you go. That one should be blank. Yep. So this would be very similar to what you had used with your client survey. We just ask people's names, their ages, obviously details where they live. We like to know their zoning. So where I live, zoning is everything. If you're residentially zoned and you want to be a farmer, too bad. Not going to happen. So that's an important piece. Do they have a plot plan? Simple question. Their occupation, that's always interesting. And most people will tell you. How did they hear about you? That's vital. So your marketing. Again, we get into some questions that you would have had in your survey. How much time do they have to put into maintaining their property? Budget implementation. So this is one that nobody ever tells us, ever, right? They'll say, it depends. Depends how excited we are. So that's not helpful at all, but you did ask. And in all fairness, a lot of people just aren't aware of costs. So like on an acreage site where I live, if somebody wanted to, like it's not hard to spend $100,000. We'll say that. Yeah, not hard, depending on what you're doing. So who has the ability to veto? That's important, because if we get direction from somebody that's not perhaps a property owner, you don't want to be making changes. What their dream is, we want to know what they see ultimately on their site. A little bit about themselves, right? What do they do in their spare time? And then we get to know a little bit more about their property. And this is pretty much identical to what your surveys would have asked for, right? Utility, level of food reliance. They need income from the property. And then we ask them to attach any images or any other notes. And often a lot of people will. If we get contacted by people building new homes, they'll attach their building plan and all kinds of stuff that really helps when we have that initial meeting with them. So we'll be able to tell an awful lot in a short bit of time here. So I hope that has answered your question and helped you out a little bit. And we have another question from Brooke. When we're preparing a design based on the growth potential of plants, how do you account for the few years where the design looks small? Right. Well, that's a really good question. I'll just show you an example here, and then we're gonna have to call her a day. So if I zoom in, I got my scale bar, and you'll notice my north arrow isn't straight up, so you can certainly bug me about that if you like. Often it'll get tweaked a little bit. But all these are woody plants here, these larger symbols, and these are not the size that those plants are coming in at. If we look at our planting plan here, and over here we have Acer Gricium, 3 of them, and they're 6 centimeter. So 6 centimeter is the caliper size. So that's metric. So in the US, that would be 2.5 inch. So they're not huge trees, and caliper is about, off the ground at about your knee height, the diameter of the stem. Okay. And that's how we rate them. We like to put in smaller trees because they tend to be in better condition, and then they're off to the races really quick. We've planted enormous trees before at great expense, and so much risk. If the plant dies, who's going to cover that? And it's not even the plant cost, it's getting it in the ground and all the equipment needed. So to answer your question, we put in the size of these symbols is going to represent sort of 10-year, at the 10-year mark. That's what we do. And I'll show you one picture here just before we. And that's often the case with the woody plants. Just looking for an image to show you here. Yeah, I'm having troubles finding my favorite photos. Okay, well, we can show you that, and then I'm gonna have to call her a day here. So this is an example of a landscape we installed, and this would be a year after, right? So if you do your site preparation really well, so we excavated out poor soil. We weren't building soil here. We were excavating it out because we were making drastic changes to the area. So we excavate all this out, we probably put in a foot to a foot and a half of new soil, planted it, and then the highest quality compost we can get, which around here right now is about $100 a cubic yard. It's very expensive, but this is the result. Boom, you have a lot of soil organism activity in the soil, and that drives the nutrient cycle in the plants, and you get a really good response. So let me see if we can get same with this. This is a year after planting, right? And it's a huge area. We brought in some pretty big woody plants, right? But all of these herbaceous plants and all of the grasses, they're just all 1 gallon pots. So 6-inch pots, but boom, they're off to the races when they get what they need in terms of good soil, good irrigation, and this was at an organic farm, so it had to look real kind of wild. And the planting here kind of resembled that, but that's just 1 year's growth, and it's doable. It's just you got to set the stage right. And then if you have a strong first year in your landscape and it gets hit with something the second year, a setback of some description, it's not going to be the end of the world. But if you have a setback in year 1 with a new planting, yeah, it's probably not going to recover properly, right? So first year is vital to support it with irrigation and just observation. Yeah, this was a fun project doing that. That's a year later, right? So you can do a lot in a little time. It's just this was a huge hardscape project we did, and I had engineered. This was all engineered. Yeah, it took quite a while. It was like 6 months to do this, and it also included a sunroom, which we subcontracted that to an installer. But we worked with them and we had a mason in here doing all those stonework. And this is back in the day when this is all we used to do is just natural stone. And whereas now it's more concrete unit pavers and Allen block, because the pricing of this is just, it's way through the roof. Even back in the day, this was 6 figures, right? Now, I don't know. And they had to do this because they had a bank here that was sloughing, and there was a lot of water pouring out of the bank. So they had to control the space. So we retained it and drained behind it properly. But of course, engineers were there all the way along with the structural engineers for the wall, and then we had geotech engineers on the soil. So yeah, that was kind of took the liability off of us, right? That's the main thing. And where I live, you can't build a wall over about 4 feet without some engineering. So this one started out low, but it was about 8 feet high down at the bottom here, so way higher than and I could go on for an hour just on this project because we have a lot of images that we take during the course of a project. But yeah, I should stop my babbling here and make sure that everybody's questions are answered. Looks like we have them all done. And anybody have any last questions before we call her a day, or feel free to type in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, whatever works. But I think we've covered off quite a bit, and I wish all the best to all of you with your future endeavors, and I really hope that a lot of you take up more design work in the future. And just if you do, try and do so in a, take baby steps with it, and you'll probably find it's a lot more enjoyable experience. Yeah, so I hope that my feedback's been helpful for all of you over the course, and really look forward to seeing your final design beginning next week. If you do run into any trouble at all, don't hesitate to drop me a note, and I can help you out. But yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for all the kind notes there. And yeah, really enjoy the Q&A sessions with all of you. Yeah, so you take care and thank you again. Bye for now.